I was an arms dealer in another life. Now I am a man without a podcast. But now I have this mine, a place to draw out the wondrous U-235. Here we will make weapons-grade uranium, and when I am done, I will buy a podcast of my choosing.
Welcome to another episode of Spawnography, Hellspawn. I'm your host, Piers Leiden, they, them, here with
George Marston, they, them, or she, her.
Oh boy.
Yeah, a little Doctor Strangelove there I channeled.
Also a little bit of the caterpillar from Bug's Life.
Oh, okay, sure.
Which was probably a little Doctor Strangelove.
Yeah, probably.
So
Dr. Erlich Westerlund there. We'll talk about him. Boy, we're getting into some Curse of the Spawn issues today. And we'll talk about that in a minute. First off, Pierce, how's your weekend? How's it been? It's been about a week since we recorded again, so...
Yeah, so my hockey season is in full swing, and my kids won this week. We had we won with 8 seconds left.
Bully. I have no children in my life, and therefore I spend a small amount of money on toys. I usually wait till they go on sale, and this weekend I got the jackpot on 2 sales. I tip for all you Marvel Legends collectors who don't know this: if you go to Ollie's, if you have an Ollie's discount outlet in your area, you can get some cool stuff. That is where I got one of the 3 packs of X-Men figures. They did a whole line of X-Men figures based on the cover of X-Men 275. You know, the one where they all go into space.
Yeah.
And they find Professor X's Warlord, and they're all wearing the training uniforms. And it's
rules.
Like Gambit and Wolverine. Well, I have that whole line now because I got them all on discount.
Some
at Ollie's. There was also a sale on the internet. So that's my, I'm like a vulture. I wait and peck at the sales when they're dead.
I mean, so it makes you feel a lot better about... One of my main hobbies is Magic the Gathering, and it's never on sale. So
no. You got to get good at trading for a game like that, really.
Which I am when I can meet up with folks to actually do that. I'm pretty good. I have a couple guys where like I've traded them a card where I've traded a card that they wanted, but I didn't get back fair value. And I'll be like, Steve, you owe me. And he'll be like, I got you. You know?
I used to play Legend of the Five Rings, which is it's not a game right now, but it was for a long time a collectible card game that was different from Magic. It was much longer and much more based on like territories and different conflicts. It was a little less direct.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I used to play that, and I didn't want to spend a lot of money on cards, but I did want the best ones. So I got really good at trading. There used to be a forum for it and stuff where you could go, and I got some really good deals that way. So we've been talking now for about 7 minutes about anything but Curse of the Spawn.
Yep.
And that's not a long time. You know, that's not wet film discussion length, but...
Well... You know,
nothing
it could
will
be if you want it to be.
Yeah. But we're talking about Curse of the Spawn. This is our first dip into Spawn's first ongoing spinoff. There was some spinoff limited series before, and we've covered some of them. Angela, Curse of the Spawn, some of those things. Not Curse of the Spawn, Blood Feud is what I meant to say.
Yes.
Angela and Blood Feud. Now we're getting into Curse of the Spawn, which is the first ongoing spinoff. And the primary creative team, who are the creative team on almost most of the issues, I think, at least for the first chunk, writer Alan McElroy and artist Dwayne Turner. And we're going to get into the credits, of course, the full credits. But I want to talk about them first for a little bit, because as much as this comic, and we'll discuss our opinions on it, I'm sure, in depth, as much as this comic doesn't exactly work for me, it does have a very interesting creative pedigree.
So Alan McElroy is probably the more familiar name of the two for most listeners. If you've watched HBO's Spawn series, he's kind of the showrunner and main writer of most of those episodes, if not all of them.
Also has a credit as one of the screenwriters of the film.
Yeah, exactly. And so Alan McElroy very involved in sort of the bringing Spawn into another medium. So it kind of makes sense that he gets tapped to be the guy to do Curse of the Spawn. I have a feeling that he's probably a comics fan, wanted to write comics, had this in already knowing Todd McFarlane, and was like, I'll write whatever you want. Because if you look at his career,
yeah, well, he's done a lot of TV. Well, he's also got an interesting background with horror and horror-tinged stuff. One of his first big credits as a writer is Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. So he's got
the best
right
Halloween.
Off the bat. Okay. There's also just want to say it's almost his birthday, October 20th. So when we're recording this, it's October 13th.
Hey,
so
that's Raj's birthday.
Hey, how about that? Twinsies.
Shout out to Raj. He definitely doesn't listen to the podcast, but
no, but that's fine.
He's a buddy.
He also, in recent years, his career has been that for a while he was an executive producer and writer on Star Trek Discovery. And now he's currently a writer on Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Now, I don't know if you're a Trek fan of or if you're a fan of those, or of Trek overall. I live in a Star Trek house very strongly. There's a huge collection of Star Trek memorabilia and tapes and DVDs in my living room, and that belong to my roommate and dear friend. And so Strange New Worlds is a favorite of ours. But I don't know if you've watched any of that.
Growing up, I was a Voyager fan because it was on Sunday nights, and that was how my dad would watch it. My dad is not a Trekkie, but he likes. My dad's so weird. I love my dad, but he got me into a million things, only for me to get very into it and then find out that he did not like it that much, or just sort of like. He almost engaged with things out of obligation. Like my dad got me into Star Trek. My dad got me into Star Wars. My dad got me into comic books. And then at some point he just like dropped those things. And so like now he's just like, yeah, I don't know. He has like he has like almost zero affinity for them. It's very, very strange. He watched every season of Arrow. And I was like, oh, so you like must like that. And he goes, no, it's terrible by the end. And I was like, you watched the whole thing?
It.
And
some
he's like,
people
yeah, well,
just they're people who they finish it.
If you're gonna start something, right? If he's taught me anything, it's that if you're gonna start something, you better finish it. So that's why I don't like TV, I think. Because I feel like I'll have to finish it. And I hate that.
Well, fair
obligation.
Enough.
The horror, the Halloween 4 of it all makes so much sense here, right?
Yeah, it does.
But the Star Trek of it all, to me, makes zero sense.
Well, bear in mind, that's now almost 20 years on, almost 30 years on at this point, 25 years since these movies that he got into Star Trek. So,
oh, absolutely.
I'd say he's probably matured as a person and a storyteller. These comics we'll talk about it a lot, and there's a letter we'll talk about at the end that really sums it up. These comics are written for a specific audience who see a specific type of content as adult and edgy and older and mature. Mature in particular is a thing that these comics seem to be shooting for.
Yeah, we're right in the thick of fall of 1997. And so edgelord kind of shit is...
I was deep in my Jinkos by 1997.
Yeah, these are the most Jinko Gene comics of all time, in a way.
Honestly, bring back Jinkos. They're so good. Look, they're like $300 now because they're a lot of denim, and I get that. But I'm going to say something. Tight pants, sure. They don't leave a lot to the imagination. They don't have a lot of uses. Jinkos, you could camp in them. You could have anything under there. You could have 5 legs. You could have no legs. You could be a ghost floating. That was the goal when I was a teenager. Was we would go roller skating or roller blading, really, at the skating rink, and the coolest Jinkos and the most dangerous were the ones that you could get that would go down over your roller skates, so it looked like you were just gliding
floating
on the floor.
around. That's pretty cool. Have you seen the guy on TikTok who wears Jinkos and has like aggressive inline skates? So he's extremely close to the ground with his Jinkos. He has a whole Super Nintendo in his back pocket.
That makes sense because that's what we used to do. Literally, my friend would carry his fucking N64 to my house in his. That's not even a joke. That's so real to me, and especially the aggro skates, because that's what was cool when I was a teenager. I never got into skateboarding, but I did try to do the aggressive skating, and I did fuck up both my knees. I had water on my knee in like the first week of 6th grade because I was trying to grind a curb. Anyway, this is a very nostalgic conversation.
Makes a lot of sense that we're both fruit booters.
This would have been around, honestly, about the time, actually. I would have definitely been doing that. So this also was definitely the kind of material that would have appealed to me as someone who was, I guess South Park was 1990. Had that started yet?
Yeah, right around the same time.
Yeah, so we were getting into that. We were getting into, like, this is the era of, like, Dennis Leary and, like, George Carlin. Not that I would put them in the same category, but, like,
never.
Their comedy specials had us all thinking, everybody as a teenager, we were watching them both and quoting them both as, like, edgy comedy bits and, like, thinking that made us aware in ways that it didn't.
Yeah. Like, it's something that I've thought about with Spawn in general, is that, like, Spawn deals with, like, real things.
Yeah.
Except that, like, the way that it deals with real things is, like, in a very, like, I hope that there's, like, a edgy demon guy to deal with it. Like, it's not realistic at all.
I miss the edgy demon of it all, and we'll get into that. I do want to talk about, before we start, though, and before we get into the full credits, I want to talk about Dwayne Turner, the artist, not the inker, that's Danny Meeke, but Dwayne Turner, the penciler. Pretty strong resume as well. And again, you know, the people who are fans of comics in the 90s and the late 80s might recognize some of his pedigree as well, because he started on books like Avengers Spotlight and Transformers. Avengers Spotlight, great comic. It was usually Hawkeye teaming up with someone, or there would be like a split story of Hawkeye in the front, someone else in the back, mullet style.
It's from Brooklyn too.
Yeah. And so he did a long run of Luke Cage. There was a 90s Cage title that sort of revamped Luke Cage. He did that.
I remember that.
And then his
I don't remember it, but I read it later.
From 95 to 96, so just before this, he did the first like 16 issues or so of Sovereign 7 with Chris Claremont. So Chris Claremont, of course, X-Men writer par excellence. Everyone knows who it is. Sovereign 7 was one of the first creator-owned DC comics under the DC banner that was like a superhero comic. Never touched the DC universe. It was about a team of like characters. But he, germane to this podcast, is he penciled and inked that. And I went back and looked at some of that, and we'll talk about that when we get into the content here. He has a few other co-creations. If you read some of the what was that? The storyline in Batman where Stephanie where Spoiler accidentally starts a war with all the gangs.
And
Orpheus, she almost they fake her
Orpheus
death.
Rising.
Well, Orpheus was in that comic. Anyway, he's a Batman supporting character, Orpheus.
Is that Yeah, no, I think that's Orpheus Rising.
Yes.
Oh,
correct.
no, it's War Games.
War Games is the crossover, and Orpheus is a character in War Games. And so that's why I was bringing that up. Yes, War Games is the one where where Spoiler accidentally starts a gang war and it becomes this whole thing. And that's the one where Leslie Tompkin fakes her death.
Yes.
Anyway,
yeah.
He also created Hulk 2099 with a writer who I think is still in jail.
Nope, just got
Gerard
out,
Jones.
2022.
Oh, well, fuck that guy.
Yep.
Again, my opinions don't reflect those of my employer, but I can safely say fuck that guy.
Yeah.
Those who are not familiar, he co-created some interesting comics like Hulk 2099 and Prime. He also was in possession of a lot of child exploitation material and went to jail for that. So there you go.
It is the
but he
opinion
also
of
created.
me. Fuck that guy.
Yeah, absolutely. Co-signed, endorsed. He also created Tracy 13 with Joe Kelly, who was first as a Superman supporting character, but she's the daughter of Dr. 13. Did you ever read Dr. 13? What was the name of that comic?
No, I never read that.
Oh, it was pretty good. It was really good. At the time, it was
crazy
fun.
It's actually crazy when you look at his bibliography. He's worked with Joe Kelly, Roger Stern, Chris Claremont, Greg Rucka, Todd McFarlane, because he does a couple of issues of Spawn that we'll get to eventually.
Mm-hmm.
Dwayne McDuffie on Avenger Spotlight, Don McGregor, Bobby Chase, Marie Javins, like Larry Hama. Like, this guy was...
He was a big name for a little while.
Yeah.
He was a big name. And I think that's why he got on Curse of the Spawn. Right after Sovereign 7, he left about halfway through the run of Sovereign 7, which I think was like 30 issues or something.
36, I think.
Yeah, so he left almost halfway through. And he went from there to Curse of the Spawn. Something I want to point out right now, and I want to point it out because I think it's important for Spawn as a character, is that Alan McElroy and Dwayne Turner are both black. They're a black creative team on ostensibly on at least the mythos and sometimes writing a black hero in Spawn. The first two top line marquee black creators in Spawn to this point.
It's true.
And in a rarity, like, I'm not going to say there weren't other black people in the creative process or working on Spawn, and there were, but as a creative team, I think that's a milestone for a black character, especially in an era where, well, I use the word milestone, where Milestone was almost one of the only places where a creative team of two black people was likely to be the case. So I think that's important. Obviously, as we'll get into, there's still some weird stereotyping and stuff in here. That's a separate thing. But I think that it's interesting and frankly cool. And I wouldn't doubt that, maybe Alan McElroy was looking for a black co-creator, and that's why they got him from DC. He was a rising name at the time.
Yeah, I would hope so. Honestly, the guy that I wish... I don't know for a fact that he didn't do any Spawn, but Dwayne McDuffie's the guy that...
Well, Dwayne McDuffie is one of the greatest comic writers and greatest superhero writers of all time. A lot of his greatest work was outside of the comic medium, but adapting comics. But his work in Milestone was fantastic. Even the stuff like when he went to DC later, where he was having a hard time creatively and they were kind of hampering him. Mm-hmm. Even that is written with a care and an eye towards character that you weren't getting in a lot of other places at the time.
Yeah, I mean, I would say like the big two for a while were him and Priest. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think, though, that they both became pretty disillusioned with the industry, obviously.
Yeah. Priest has, of course, had a renaissance in recent years, returning to
Black
DC,
Adam,
Marvel,
and
a lot of other... Yeah, and he's got a Justice League run. He's written Vampirella. He's just been back around. Well, and of course, Priest was an editor at Marvel for a long time before he was doing a lot of writing. Was he doing Quantum and Woody by this point? Which was
right around the same time for Valiant.
Yeah, that was a late 90s thing. That was where he was like kind of really becoming a top writer for everybody. For those who don't know, the original run of Quantum and Woody Valiant comic was like just a hugely popular third-party superhero comic that was doing superheroes and comedy together in a way that very few other writers, especially mainstream superhero writers, were tackling yet. I think we wouldn't have comics like
Deadpool.
Deadpool was kind of around the same time with Joe Kelly.
I mean, Joe Kelly is doing a similar thing, but I think
even it was very absurdist. Quantum and Woody was absurd, but it was grounded in, it wasn't like breaking the third wall. It wasn't the same level of humor. It was more of a sitcom kind of superhero. I think we wouldn't have like Fraction and Aha's Hawkeye with that.
Or even FF, I guess.
I was about to say FF, some of those kind of comics.
That's true.
So he was a groundbreaking writer. Would have loved to see him do, and maybe we will see him do some Spawn. What I would love would be some art. I would love to see Dennis Cowan on Spawn. If you think about how his, like, especially his late 90s art looked.
Oh my goodness.
It was just so aesthetic. And that's a word that gets thrown around as a kind of nebulous term a lot in 2024. You know, it's a TikTok term or whatever. But like his art is so, it's vibes based.
Yeah.
More than, and that would work so well for a character like Spawn or a book like Curse of Spawn. Maybe not these issues. And I don't want to take anything away from the fact that Dwayne Turner is an accomplished artist of his own.
I'm glad that we kind of did this sort of preface to these issues, because I think, you know, off mic, we kind of talked about how we joke about like Spawn issues being some of the comics of all time. There's still comics that I relatively enjoy. Like that I'm like, oh, okay, cool. These are comics that I do not enjoy.
I did not enjoy these.
And in places, I don't think that they're good. And there are places where I do think that Alan McElroy, as not a seasoned comic writer, but a seasoned screenwriter, is doing things with dialogue and captions that work in a script that you're not seeing some of that stuff because it's character motivation that Dwayne Turner is kind of drawing around, that there's it's not very cohesive. That's kind of what I'm saying. Is like
there is an economy of there's an economy of script in this that we don't often see in Spawn core series, but more often even than in the Spawn core series, it's just saying what we're seeing in a way that, you're right, makes it a little harder. We'll get into that. We're kind of getting into the criticism of the overall arc here. The third piece of the puzzle of this Curse of the Spawn arc, the reason we're covering it is because it gets into the origins and at the time sort of contemporaneous to the Spawn series, the actions in the quote unquote present day of Jessica Priest. And Jessica Priest is the character that replaced Chapel as the murderer of Spawn. Chapel was revealed, was it issue number 10, I think? 12? 12, where it was revealed that Chapel, Spawn's old squad mate, was the one responsible for his death. He's believed this for 50 plus issues at this point, but it was just revealed unto him that a woman named Jessica Priest is actually the killer. This is a change that was done for the movie because they didn't want to bring in the rights to Chapel, the character whose rights were tied up in Youngblood film rights because he was created as a character in Youngblood by Rob Liefeld.
Which now those Youngblood rights are, I don't know, feels like everybody, like when you're born, you get like a little bit of the Youngblood rights.
Youngblood rights. That is the Youngblood blood right, is that everyone gets one ounce of Youngblood. Yeah. If it had any value. Anyway, so it's shown right on the cover. This is Curse of the Spawn 12, 13, and 14 is the arc we're covering. It's 3 issues. We will do our best to blast through some of this because it's not.
It's a very simple arc, but it is weirdly tangled knot.
I wish that we had hours and hours to dive into this, because if we really wanted to analyze it, there's so much text in here that's like, what the fuck am I looking at? To say up top, it's basically why we're reading this is because we just got to the point in Spawn, the core series, where they revealed Jessica Priest. If you're listening to our show, you know that. And this is the insert kind of, if we're doing a machete order thing, where we get a side view of Jessica Priest's origins and her actions, and not
Who she
necessarily how
is,
they
kind
relate to
of.
Spawn aside from Jason Wynn, but how she fits into the comic mythology. And this, I mean, the cover of 12 has what's her
Melinda
name?
Clark.
Melinda Clark, thank you, the actor who plays Jessica Priest in the film, a photo of her on the cover. In case you're wondering what you're going to read here or why you're reading this, it tells you right there, this is synergy, baby. This is corporate synergy. We're crossing those streams, and not an unheard of thing at that time, but maybe one of the first times, certainly the first time for Spawn, where it's a movie concept crossing back over into the comic in a substantial and kind of critical to the story way.
Totally. And I want to give Melinda Clark her flowers a little bit as well as an actress. Many Spawn fans may only know her as Priest in the Spawn movie. However, she's her big thing is her big claim to fame is the OC. She's Marissa's
see?
mom for like she's Marissa's mom for like 100 episodes almost.
Wow.
And she's been in a bunch of stuff. She was in Nikita for like 70 episodes. She was on CSI
Wow.
for a bunch of episodes. Yeah.
This a lot closer to Nikita than just about any of that stuff. Way that it's an edgy, almost prurient, very sexualized
like
sex and violence.
Like not Barbarella, but kind of. No, it's closer to VIP.
Or like,
do you remember VIP with Pamela Anderson?
Yeah, oh, hell
that's
yeah,
what this is.
This is like Black Scorpion, like Street Angel almost. Like it's that, but like they showed that on like ABC during the day on Saturdays. This is solidly HBO material, or aiming for it, in the sense that it is like edgy and violent and extremely sexualized.
If you took a few things
to
out,
the point of prurience.
If you took a few things out, it's a USA original.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, yeah. Like, did you ever stay at? Now, I only experienced this in hotel rooms or something like that, but sometimes you could stay up late at night on cable and you'd see a movie on USA that was like, you know, a titty movie, but they would edit out all the nudity, so it was just a really shitty movie.
Just
with
the plot.
Like, but like it'd still be like women in bikinis doing like the gotta save the car wash or whatever, like really like schlocky movies. This is very close to that. Like you could see this on USA at night, absolutely. Yep. And we talked a lot about the reputations of the creators involved. Part of the reason I wanted to do that up front is to show that these are respected creators. They have careers. Dwayne Turner went on to do advertising and I think video games for
stuff,
a long time.
He got out of the industry in the early mid 2000s and has not come back as far as we know.
Probably making good money and doing good work. I don't know what games he's worked on, but
and Alan McElroy obviously killing it, right? So, and the rest of the you know what? Let me get into the credits.
Well, I'm going to do it.
Oh, right, because it's Curse of the Spawn. It's not Spawn.
That's right. No, that's
everybody.
Right. I know. I was going to say before that is all that to say. With all due respect, before I take a shit on you, I understand that you're not represented solely by Curse of the Spawn 12, 13, and 14.
I will say also that is something that we feel about all of the creators that work on everything. Like, just because we don't like something and maybe we make jokes about it or shit on it or whatever, guys, we have a fucking Spawn podcast. Some of it's not good. And I think that a lot of the folks involved may agree with us. And if they don't, I'd love to talk to them about it. Like,
I'd love to interview Alan McElroy. That'd be amazing, especially. Yeah. I mean, honestly, highly respect him as a producer of Star Trek.
100%.
Those are shows I've watched and enjoyed. So he has created content I've enjoyed. I want to throw that disclaimer out there that we didn't like these comics and it's going to come through, but we respect these creators as people. And this is let's call it a we read it so you didn't have to.
Yeah.
And with that, here are the credits,
George.
The credits for Curse of the Spawn number 12. That's right. Todd McFarlane and Image Comics present Codename Priest. dedicated to, I'll read that at the end. It's just ordered in a weird way. Sorry. Todd McFarlane and Image Comics presents Codename Priest. Story, Alan McElroy. Pencils, Dwayne Turner. Inks, Danny Meeke. Special thanks to Chance Wolfe. Copy editor and letterer, Tom Orzakowski. Colors, Todd Broker and Mark Nicholas. Cover and design, Brent Ash. Dedicated to Calvin and Del Boyd and Beverly and Chuck Taylor. I looked them up and they're not famous people at all. I'm sure they're just people in the lives of the creators. Oh, interesting note in the credits, Orzakowski was also the letterer on Sovereign 7, which is probably how he got to know Dwayne Turner before doing Curse of the Spawn. Colors on Sovereign 7 were partially done by Oleoptics.
Oh, hey.
Yeah.
Missing. You know what? It's been a while since we got Steve Olaf and Oleoptics, so...
Yeah.
As we know, the comics industry very incestuous, so much like this comic. Anyway, we'll get into it.
Now, Danny Meeke inking this alongside a lot of Spawn, I think. So I think some of that starts to come through in the art. Because
there's a lot of moments that are pretty Todd-ish, I thought.
Right off the bat, the art is not that great. I'll just get ahead of that right now and say that when I looked at Sovereign 7, where Dwayne Turner inked himself, I actually thought it was pretty good. It had some 90s-ness to it in terms of like some of the anatomy and layouts that were more common and widely used at the time, and you'd see those a lot more. That said, I really liked how the inking related to the layouts. I really liked the line structure. It was a little more solid and a little more bold than you would see Danny Meeke doing, and I don't think it meshes very well with Dwayne Turner. So as we get into this art and I start slagging on parts of it, I want to say I think it's not served by the inking or the coloring at any point throughout.
There's 2 colorists on here, and there's also that special thanks to Chance Wolfe. There's a lot of weird computer effects.
Yeah, these panel borders and stuff.
And I have to imagine that like the special thanks is like panel borders, maybe like a page here and there, but the colors doing some weird like backgrounds and stuff that's like not in the pencils that I think actually make the pencils look worse.
Like I said, I don't think the inks and the colors mesh with the pencils. I think this is Danny Meeke trying to bring Dwayne Turner sort of more into the quote-unquote house style, if we'll call it that. I also went ahead and flashed back to Curse of the Spawn #1, which I haven't read through any of the other Curse of the Spawn issues, but it's the same creative team. Because this felt very rushed to me at points, especially later parts of the arc. It had the same exact vibes and the same level of quality in that issue to me, just by glancing through the art. So it's something that's going on in the creative team that's not quite meshing, especially even 12 issues later. It doesn't really look better than it did in issue 1. We're not even describing what's in it yet, but we're kind of doing all this up front.
There's actually a letter in one of these issues about like, what's the timeline for them to like get these done? And Todd says, the same as everybody. It's a monthly deadline.
We'll talk about that because there's some interesting stuff here based on this being in late 1997, coming after early 1997. So let's get into it a little bit. I'm not going to necessarily go page by page. What we're doing in the opening here is we have this scene of a little girl. You know the meme of the little girl standing in front of the burning house?
It's exactly that.
It's exactly that. It's way before that time. It's this cute little girl with a teddy bear eating marshmallows that she's roasting on her house fire with the police and firefighters showing up. Her house is on fire. The little girl's standing out there laughing and giggling, eating marshmallows, explaining that her parents wouldn't let her roast marshmallows, so she lit them on fire and roasted marshmallows on her burning parents. It's a dark origin for this little child, and it will only get darker from there. This is the level of edgelord that we're dealing with, is like Tiny Murder Child, the Halloween of it all, right here. This is like Michael Myers level of like sadistic glee for childhood mayhem.
which immediately transitions into like adult Jessica Priest. And one of the worst captions that I've ever read in my entire life is Jessica Priest feels cool warmth in her nethers, an orgasmic endorphins rush, a peaceful alpha state that can, for her, be achieved by no other act
save podcasting. Oh, no, yes. I hate that as well. That made me groan, especially when you compare it to the art that's directly to the left of it, of like the kid with marshmallows all over her face and hands. It is, look, when I looked at this, I was like, this was not, whoever drew this didn't want it to look like that by the end. It looks like it looks like an anime where the kid is really like a 9,000-year-old spirit.
Also, the eyes on the fucking teddy bear just kill me in every single panel because the
teddy bear's got a knife in it, and the teddy bear looks terrified to be held by her. The fire reflected in her eyes is the one part of it that I like.
Ass comic of all time.
Yes, the soundtrack to this is a Coal Chamber record, like 100%. This is like Molgoth the comic. It feels like for people who just a few years after this would be wearing Slipknot jumpsuits and stuff, like myself included, for just a little while. Yeah, so we see the little girl burn the house down to roast marshmallows. We jump 2 decades later inside an Iraqi military complex.
Well, we also further establish that she sings songs.
She's like Spider-Man through this whole thing. So we see Jessica Priest. She's ravaging her way through an Iraqi industrial or military complex, which the politics of that in 1997 are fucking, they're not paying attention to politics when they're writing this comic. We're going to talk about that because by the end of the sequence, this cartoon of her here, her face, like this drawing of her, the cartooning on her face looked cartoonish. She looks very much Looney Tunes.
Yeah.
And she's singing "It's My Party and You'll Die If I Want You To." It's establishing right off the bat that she is a killer who takes gleeful pleasure in mayhem and carnage and has since she was a child to a sexual degree. This is like the MacArthur triangle or whatever it is.
It's the thing that makes this whole comic just like basically unreadable.
It is someone cramming as many stereotypes about what they think a psycho killer from birth who becomes an assassin is.
But there are some parts of this that are like capital letters strong female character needs to be.
Well, I don't even want to say she's like a bad girl character is what she's like. This is very like Lady Death, Lady Justice, Lady Rawhide, Lady.
No, but Angela was a good bad girl character. We already got like a version of this that's like
saying, but by 1997, this is the warped, worn out, like
I guess you're
laundry wringing out version of it. Like it's that level of like barbed wire, like late night TV strong female character of the late 90s where you're still seeing her in a thong, basically. The level of attention this comic pays to connecting sex and violence is, there's no other word but prurient. It's very prurient. It is
100%.
It is titillating in a juvenile and iconoclastic way, where in that way of the 90s where like, okay, the 80s were cocaine and titties everywhere, right? Every movie had was just excess. It was like the decade of Arnold Schwarzenegger and everything. You know, by the 90s, the movies were a little more chaste. You're getting less and less of like the obligatory nude scenes by the end of the late 90s. You know, you're getting more focus on like special effects and big budget action. And that sense of excess and that sense of like sexuality is being pushed further and further back on late night TV. HBO's like deep into like real
and actually
sex.
when we got it, right, like a movie like Showgirls,
Exactly.
people were like, terrible film.
Well, they were wrong.
I know. No, but that's what I'm saying, though.
I mean, they were kind of right.
Yeah, well, Paul Schrader sucks.
It's complicated.
But he's made some of the greatest movies of all time. And also, Total Recall comes out in 1990.
Yeah.
Whatever. But whatever. So, the 90s don't really start till like 1993 anyway.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. By the end of the 90s, by 1997, think about Spawn, the TV show. The cartoon was coming on right before Real Sex on HBO. So you had people who were tuning in to watch Spawn, which did have depict like nudity and violence and blood and stuff, that was catering to that HBO late night audience that was tuning in for that kind of content, to see that kind of stuff. And they were staying on to watch. You know, I said Real Sex like 3 times, and if you don't know what that is, I'm sure you do. It's just a staple of the late 90s, mid to late 90s. It did more for sex education and to demystify weird shit for people than just about anything else in the 90s. And a lot of it was very, again, prurient, but also, you know, a lot of people's queerness and queer identity was shaped by being exposed in a positive way to things like kink and stuff like that. And this is someone taking that and funneling it back down into that Spawn lens. And so we get her going through, they call her a seductress. She's like tying people up, these Iraqi soldiers, and she's launching missiles from their compound at Israel. And she says, congratulations, you just started a war on Israel. This was the year that there was some small forward motion in peace talks between Israel and Palestine. Not even peace talks, but there were some agreements. I will fuck it up if I get too deep into the politics of that. They didn't get anywhere, but they did not get anywhere into the politics of any of this. They were just like, this is again a like American Ninja level of like B-movie like understanding and care of like politics and depiction of
this is a Chuck Norris movie with just
like Rambo,
a sexy
like,
lady.
Yeah. If Chuck Norris was a hot woman, he would have played, yes, absolutely. This is Delta Force level of like
100%.
Just dumb, stupid, jingoistic action. Now, again, when we talk about that, I don't want to lay that on these creators as people.
I mean, part of it was told to them to do, right?
Well, sure.
And definitely Alan McElroy, as being a screenwriter, especially for TV, some of your job is, hey, this is what has to happen. Make it happen.
A lot of this comic is like IMDb, because we're just scrolling through, or like it's like flipping through the movie channels in 1997. We'll talk about that. So she launches the missile. She tells these guys they might even get a sexual thrill out of it if they let themselves.
Yeah, it's weird.
She meets with Jason Wynn in this weird scene where they're doing laps. She's in this bikini. The thing I think that's funny about this is they're doing laps in a pool, but when we get an establishing shot, it goes from close-up shots of them swimming to an establishing shot of them in a very small hot tub. So it looks like that Saturday Night Live sketch with Jim Carrey. Like they're just doing laps in the fucking hot tub. But they're schwitzing afterwards. The bikini is drawn very strangely. Jason Wynn is straight up smoking a blunt.
He gives her a mini disc.
There's files. We're getting into the core Spawn stuff here. That is the closest we'll get to core Spawn, maybe.
Hey, everybody. There's a file. Take a drink.
The one thing I want to point out is they took time in the coloring to like color where her nipples would be, and it's wrong. Like,
yeah. We move on and we go back to Queens, and we find out that Jessica Priest is also, what is her name? Jessica Anderson Chin. And she has a husband who's 15 years her senior. I don't know why we need that detail.
Because he has 2 kids.
Who cares?
She's supposed to be like young and hot.
We don't even need that.
She's supposed to be young and hot. Well, here's the thing, Pierce. Here's why, Pierce. This is a writing trick. because she's supposed to be both young and hot, and she has to secretly be a mom. You can't be hot and a mom in 1997. So this is a very like True Lies-esque twist, you know?
I guess. But also, I actually do kind of like the cartooning on this page. I don't like the layouts. Here's one thing I'll say. I think Dwayne Turner is a good artist. I think his layouts are bad.
Yeah.
I think they're like objectively bad. I don't think that the script led him in a way to be dynamic in any sort of way. Because there is a lot of sort of like very milquetoast, moving the chains kind of nonsense.
She meets with her family. She hooks up with her husband at night. And we see on the TV, we hear that Israel has already launched an all-out counterattack against Iraq, which that would be an apocalyptic thing to be happening at any time. This is also connected to Jason Wynn, so that storyline is connected directly to what he's been doing in Spawn, which is very similar. Really, we're just going to get a lot of that. The one important thing that we need to really see here is that she still has this poor teddy bear locked away somewhere.
I hate that. The image of that teddy bear is haunting.
It is. I have a teddy bear that I've had since I was 4 years old, and it sits on my shelf, and I love it with all my heart. And this is like a weird, jarring, like Wario version of that for me. This poor teddy bear is like, it looks like it's been abused and hated for so long. So now she's journeying into the movie Anaconda, which came out in April 1997, and this came out in September 1997.
So it was top of mind.
Exactly.
Yeah. Jason Wynn tells her she's got to go on this mission. She's got to go to Brazil. So she tells her family, like, I have to go on a business trip. But when I get back, we're going to go to Disneyland.
Yeah, so she goes to Brazil to get this Heat 19 biological weapon from this secret lab. And to get there, she has to take her small team of soldiers. She has 2 soldiers on her side on this boat with this sketchy guy who has a monkey. Monkey has a fez.
And he keeps making dick jokes.
They go into the jungle. Yeah, he keeps trying to get her downstairs to see his knife or to see his other monkey.
And anything like, that it is, he says it. Yeah, I got a below deck.
Yeah,
meaning
it's weird. Look, we're kind of. This is very choppy what we're doing with this, but
it's not how we do things.
It's hard to talk about without dialing in too deep. Look, what's going to follow here is a succession of movie cliches happening to Jessica Priest as she gets into this lab. We get a little bit of Anaconda where she meets the boat guide who warns her about the creatures in the water. Right. And she'll have an encounter with them later. It literally says the heart of darkness. And then we get into a bit of Apocalypse Now where there's the boat getting exploded.
And then she jumps out with her guns blazing.
This is the best picture of that we'll get, I think, in this whole 3-parter is this shot right here.
Oh, it's really good. It's actually
a good one.
Yeah.
She says, rule number 1, uninvited dickheads get a goddamn bullet in their rude little pea brains. That's the level of dialogue that's happening on every page, and every caption is like, these fucks are gonna shit when they fucking shit on this shit. Fuck is like.
I think that's the other thing though too is like every page has like 5 to 6 to 7 captions. It feels like. And you're just like, what am I reading? We're writing a book report right now.
It said, okay, so look, death is a thief for the night. The gas closes in rapidly. Crude brew, something a little more upmarket than these jerk-offs might have lived. Where is the gas coming from? We see they're in gas masks. It's just kind of there.
Also, she doesn't have one.
She gets one in a minute.
I know, but like she doesn't have one yet. So is she immune to the gas at this point? Is that what that's saying?
She's a super soldier, I guess. She gets the gas mask. I like this close-up shot of her eyes under the gas mask. She forces the other guys to take off their gas masks. She's got all this high-tech weaponry, but even though she survives, and so does her arsenal, her 2 companions don't. She breaks into this compound. She's blasting through people. Here is a page, this double-page spread. I want to point out her arm on the bottom side of the right page. Most of this image fucking rocks. Like, she looks great, leaping through the air, blasting everywhere. Then she's got this weird wonky arm that's like shooting a gun upside down backwards. She's breaking into this compound, and here's where we get to the end of this issue. She blasts into the compound, and she meets the two villains of this arc, who are the
Liz Arno and Kevin Bergregor.
Liz Arno and Kevin Bergregor, which Bergregor. Every time I read Bergregor through this, I laughed my ass off. So like we blasted through that, but the main important thing that's happened here is we've learned that when Jessica Priest was a little baby, she burned down her house to roast marshmallows on her parents' corpses. Yep. And as an adult, she started a war between Iraq and Israel single-handedly.
Because she's a super soldier, like shield agent, basically. She looks just like a shield agent. She looks just like Quake, basically.
She is now on a tour of jungle action stereotypes to a Brazilian lab where these two weird incestuous twins who are, I don't know if they're actually incestuous or not. It says they are later, but they have different names. Liz Arno and Kevin Bergregor. Kevin Bergregor is your mad scientist? What hockey team did he play for? So we see that we meet them. Liz Arno is like a scheming mad genius, like we've been expecting you. And Kevin Bergregor is like, hee, cutie pie, hee. And they blow her away and take her inside for experiments. And that's where this ends.
It'll make you feel a little bit better to know that Kevin Bergregor and Liz Arno don't exist except in this comic, like in these comics.
So the big takeaway from this issue is we're getting the origin of Jessica Priest. We're getting that she has this dark past throughout her childhood of murder and mayhem. And now somehow she's built this secret life for herself as an assassin while also holding on to this very normal suburban life. That suburban life part, I like that twist. We're not getting a lot of that in media with women unless they're like,
it's like Alias.
Sex workers. It's like Alias. Yeah, a little bit. That's one of the parts that works.
Yeah, I agree. But they just don't do anything with it.
No, they don't. We do get this Disney World moment at the end, but okay.
Which leads us to
Spawn, or Curse of the Spawn number 13. Todd McFarlane and Image Comics presents Heart of Darkness. Story by Alan McElroy, pencils by Dwayne Turner, inks by Danny Meeke, copy editor and lettering Tom Orzechowski, color Todd Broker and Mark Nicholas. Dedicated to Tracy and Greg Sadlon.
Who are nobody, as far as I have found.
Yeah, just people in someone's life. And you know what? Great.
Good for them.
I'm glad this isn't... I bet they love
I wouldn't
that.
want this dedicated to me at all.
Curse of the Spawn 12 summary. Jessica Priest's sociopathic personality is revealed in a flashback to her childhood. Her normal adult living arrangements and a demonstration of her present-day abilities as a secret agent government assassin. Okay. In a social setting, Jason Wynn gives Priest her new assignment to recover a biogenetic weapon-coded Heat-16 from a lab in southern Brazil. The dangerous mission quickly turns deadly, and although Priest eliminates much of the security force, she is captured and shot at the hands of the fraternal twin scientists Liz Arno and Kevin Bergregor. Okay. Heat-16 definitely sounds like a band that would have been on the Spawn soundtrack.
100%. Instead, it was Filter.
That's right.
I kind of like the first page. I think it's cool. We get this kind of like blue hued. It's the most MS-DOS ass like border and background.
Yeah, the borders, we kind of breezed through it. We mentioned the panel borders, but a lot of these borders are like industrial with like shapes on them, or they're like bubbles, or they're like sort of like how Todd and Greg Capullo will do them in the other book.
But not done in pencils and
not
inks.
done by hand. They're done with
computer.
Computer effects, which is likely where some of that, some of those special thanks from the other issue come in.
But yeah, we find out on this first page that like, so Jessica Priest now she's naked, I guess, and she's in like a Bacta tank. And then we find out that there's like two other A6 agents, which is like who she works for. And we saw the
anatomy
A6.
on this is wild. on her
Sure.
naked body.
It's not as bad as a lot of comics.
No, that's true, but nonetheless, it's not as bad as other parts of this comic. So yeah, they're in their lab. They have her and the two soldiers that she brought with her who kind of got blown up are also in these tanks. And they strap Jessica Priest into these tables where they're going to basically sample her DNA and run a bunch of tests on her, trying to
do a bunch of stuff.
Use her as a perfect killer to take her genetics that made her that way or whatever and implant them with mutants. It's a whole thing. We'll talk about it.
There's a lot of stuff here in the art where, like, when we go to the next page, like, we see like they're experimenting on her, but the art doesn't really get across what the captions are trying to say. Like, it's like, as it has been for the last 6 days, the pain is excruciating, but deep within Priest's stained soul, that agony is as familiar as an old blanket. I get that she's supposed to not be enjoying it, but like, it.
Yes, and here's what it is that the next page shows you a flashback to her time in an asylum where they're doing these like high level doses of electroshock on her. So what that means is she's experienced torture before, and to her it's not anything new. She's almost retreating into a like sort of internal state from that.
A page later, when when she starts laughing, I think effectively communicates it more. Am I speeding through it too much? I'm sorry.
Well, no, I was just going to point out that on this page it tells that she killed her parents, she killed her pets, she killed other patients, and that's why they're doing these electroshocks on her now. So into her youth, she's like, a child, and she's still committing murders. We're showing these parallels between what's happening to her in her past. They're experimenting on her, and she starts laughing as they start driving needles into her face. And that series of panels that you mentioned, maybe one of my favorite sequences in this book, just because like it drives home how maniacal this is. She's basically strapped into Skyfall? Not Skyfall. Which of those Bond movies is it where
all of them where he gets tied up?
Well, Christoph Waltz is like gonna put a needle in his eye.
No Time to Die?
No, it was before that one. Either way, it was Spectre.
It's probably Skyfall. Oh, Spectre. Yeah.
It was Spectre.
That's the one.
Spectre. He's strapped into the thing and they're like drilling into his head and shit. It's like that. And they're just taking this horrible glee in it while they're creating these mutants. What we're learning is that their plan is to dose the world with Heat 16 and kill as many people as possible with this like horrible
bioweapon,
which was the buzzword of the late 90s when it comes to these weapons. Yeah. And then remake the world with their mutants that they're creating in this lab using like Jessica Priest's killer instincts and the bodies of her compatriots. There's a lot of very sexualized, very sexist, weird stuff. She horks up a pill and she says, the things women put in our bodies, I call this PMS in a capsule. Capsule?
I don't know what that means.
PMS in a capsule. It's an explosive. It blows something up, which like, I guess explosive cramps. I don't know. I mean, look, PMS is another one of those 90s things that was like, this is what you talk about when you talk about women. You're going to bring up someone's PMS or whatever the fuck. It was
I think I said this before, but it's the most like woman written by a man.
It was the era of Al Bundy and shit. And it was like, it's very much like that level of
Al Bundy is like a sensitive feminist compared to some of the stuff that's in this book.
I will say, I like that she's basically just a badass. She Wolverines out of this. She fights her way through their compound. She finds the Heat 16, and she blasts her way out. She makes her escape, and they send the two mutated creatures, they call them ferals, that were created from her, they called it her genome. There's a lot of stuff like that, like genome, that's like foliage and library and stuff in here. It's like a level of $5 words that someone paid $4 for. And we'll get to that in the letters too. I want to get to the letters in this. So they send her to get the Heat 16. She goes back. She finds the sketchy guy who took them to the riverboat. But as she's interrogating him, they get waylaid by agents sent to, I guess, bring her back.
Also get her? Yeah.
Also get her. She gets kidnapped for a work camp by this guy, Ehrlich Westerlin. This
I will say there is the page of the Ferals like looking for the Heat 16 that fucking rocks.
Where they're just like tearing the guy apart or whatever.
No, just like they're like yelling.
Oh,
like,
yes, yes. The splash page of them with the chains. That is a great splash page.
Yeah.
Yes, the
really
monsters
cool.
look great there. They eat up a lot of people in this. And a lot of it looks like Michael Bay's Transformers to me.
I want the Ferals to fight Spawn. Like,
I was going to say, they are the other thing about this that is the most Spawn, in addition to the File, is these super soldier monsters that were created to kill someone.
Cool.
Very Cyborg.
And also, there's no
Trevor.
heaven, there's no hell. Look, Todd, you can do a thing that is not related to all the characters that you created.
At this point, I'm kind of missing that stuff, though. I really am.
You know what? I am. I also am. I'm
because it's better than this.
I'm missing.
It's better than like the orgasm of death or whatever. So she finds her way through the jungle into Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Is the next like weird jungle stereotype where this guy is mining uranium. He's gonna buy his own country when he gets uranium. Again, this reads like the quarter bin version of like some politics where like we know there's exploitative mining going on in South America. We know there are like Nazis that relocated there after the war, and this is like the topical version of that. I also want to point out this villain is an old man named Ehrlich Westerlin, who is painted like a Waura warrior. I don't know, I should have looked this up. But are the Waura people real?
They are. But
Wauya or Waura?
Yeah, okay. They're the indigenous people of Brazil.
Okay. And that's pretty ignorant of me to have said, are they real? But I'm more familiar with the name Wauya, I think is a pronunciation with the J.
They do have, with the J. They do have a similar sort of like face paint or tattoo situation that they do.
Right.
I'm also a little ignorant. I don't know very much about them.
I don't want to speak about too much about that other than it's kind of weird to me how much they dig into that. From
my research, they had a population of like less than 500 in 2010. So there's a good chance that at this point there may not be very many of them left. So
which
is unfortunate.
And I'm sure that many of them are victims of,
every
colonization and exploitation by colonizers.
100%.
But there's a mysticism that's given to them in this that's very exoticizing.
I don't know. I guess I'm trying not to lay the insensitivity maybe at his feet so much.
Well, no, I think you're right that what's going on is that, I can't not lay the insensitivity at the feet of the creators that created the comic.
I hear what you're saying. I
don't think I think it is an insensitivity born out of like
ignorance.
An ignorance.
Not out of like malice. It's not out of malice.
No, not out of malice. It's out of, I don't even want to say necessarily ignorance, and here's why. Here's what I think it is. And we've talked about this a lot with Spawn and Todd McFarlane's writing, is I think what it's born of is it's born of writers, especially through the 90s. This was a time where, stereotypes were still very heavily used in shorthand. This is a writer using all the tools of the toolbox of fiction and genre fiction, which at the time, and adventure fiction at the time, was very heavily racist. And that's because most of it was written and defined by white people in the early 20th century and the late 19th century, that type of, that Rudyard Kipling adventuring spirit, Edgar Rice Burroughs. Those are very colonialized writings. And even the things that we're referencing here, Apocalypse Now, that is a movie that is about a war of colonialism. That is white people waging war for their own political ends in a country that doesn't belong to us. Yeah. That is, they're pulling. It is a writer pulling from that toolbox and pulling from that toolbox of like 80s action films, where you could just be like, yeah, we're starting a war with Iraq and Israel by blah, blah, blah. And it's just a thing that's now happening in the background of the universe of Spawn. It's not handling with care. It is handling with abandon towards what these things mean and where they come from and what they could mean to people, and handling with very open hands any tool or any idea or any concept that seems to be coming through the pipeline to the creative influence of these comics.
For lack of a better term, nuance is just kind of on the cutting room floor of all of this.
I just mentioned TV and movies and all that stuff. Yeah. We didn't even talk about the history of this kind of like racism and exoticism in comics well into the 20th century. True. Well into the 90s in a lot of cases. I mean, this is only a few years after, God bless it, they turned Betsy Braddock into an Asian woman because the design was more popular. Like, there's a whole genre of comics as well that are like these pulp comics of like jungle adventure stories of like white men venturing into the darkest jungles of South America, of Africa, so forth, and finding these exotic and mystifying and ultimately racist, caricaturized ideas. This is someone drawing on that toolbox of fiction writing, and I don't want to necessarily blame him for that because it's not something that's unique to Alan McElroy as a writer or a creator by any stretch of the imagination.
Of course.
It is something that
it's something that we don't put at the feet of Todd McFarlane either, right?
Exactly.
Like we there's an understanding that like, hey, you write kind of what you know and also what are the tropes of the time. And then maybe later on you go, shit, maybe I shouldn't have written that. But at the time it was kind of an okay thing to write. And I think for the most part, course correction has been okay for this franchise, if we want to call it that.
I think for the most part, and I think, again, as you said, we don't look at Spawn as a political treatise on the beliefs of Todd McFarlane. We look at it, again, the same way we talk about this, as a writer using what he views as tools in a toolbox.
Mm-hmm.
Some 100%. Writers come to a much more nuanced version of that as they go on, as the cultural milieu that they're working in changes. I mean, again, Alan McElroy writing for Star Trek now, writing some very, if you look at Star Trek Discovery, the lead character on that, Burnham, is that's her name, right? I haven't watched it in so long that I'm always bad
I haven't watched it in a minute.
I'm bad at character names to begin with. I'm always like, oh, the captain or whatever. But the main character in Star Trek Discovery is a very well written woman, a black woman, played very well and written very well. So with a lot more nuance than the character of Jessica Priest. So I know Alan McElroy is capable of it, especially in recent years. I don't want to lay that, again, like you said, at his feet. I don't want to lay that at his feet as like, this is his political burden to now bear. We need to cancel him or some weird shit like that. These are, Michael Burnham. That's right. That's her name. These are comics that are drawing on traditions that were honestly created by white people. So that brings us to Curse of the Spawn number 14. Apocalypse When, as if we needed another reference to what's like really being done here. Story by Alan McElroy, pencils by Dwayne Turner, inks by Danny Meeke, copy editor and lettering Tom Orzechowski, color Todd Broker and Mark Nicholas, dedicated to Deborah Nicholas. I assume probably related to Mark Nicholas. Curse of the Spawn number 13 summary. Priest is subjected to extremely painful testing and sampling as the incestuous twins Liz Arno and Kevin Bergregor attempt to turn her into an experimental feral. That's right. They're trying to turn her into a feral, but she resists.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't understand that until I read this right now because of the way they were talking about it.
Doesn't really
I thought
make
they
any
were
sense.
using her. I thought they were using her DNA. They said, I guess they were saying she would make a good feral, but it seemed to me, and I think I got this wrong. We talked about it 1 minute ago, that I thought they were using her DNA to like make the ferals better.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Which anyway, part of the problem of the storytelling of this, and honestly, I'm going to be honest with you, it actually doesn't matter. And here's why. Because none of this is going to come up in Spawn again, I don't think. Maybe Heat 16 will. Maybe some of the Israel...
Not in a really important way. It's just for you to know some stuff about Jessica Priest. So, honestly, listeners, if this is an episode that you skipped and you're listening to it later, we get it.
Yeah. So, anyway, they try to turn her into a feral and they fail. When Priest escapes with their prized Heat 16 module, her former comrades and / ferals are sent after her, where they destroy the occupants of the nearby town of El Morte, which is Portuguese for death for death. There's a moment earlier though where they mix. I don't know if Portuguese counting is the same as French, but it seems like they're mixing French and Spanish. No, that's not Portuguese. Do. She says earlier numero do, which is like...
Yeah, it should be like
wrong.
Duas or doi.
Dwa or dwa.
Dwa. Yeah, whatever. Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. We're really not speaking Portuguese well right now because I've never tried. But she's in this place being held by this guy Westerlin who's making her mine. This drawing of her here, I hate this drawing of her like in her shredded mining clothes, looking sexy as she's doing like enslaved labor sort of. It's one of those like ass first 90s poses. I understand some of it's meant to be foreshortening because we can see his fingers in the foreground, but it's not good. And the coloring does it no favors because it's just this gray blob. He decides, there's a malfunction in one of the old pieces of equipment. There's this mine collapse, and because Jessica Priest in the previous issue befriended one of the other mine workers, she sees that woman, Arancia, about to be caught by the rocks. She pushes her out of the way. Now, I want to take a quick note. Arancia is a Brazilian name, and I looked that up because I was curious if that was just like an attempt, but that's a Brazilian name. And that is kind of what makes me think also that some of this, like the use of the Waura, Wauya, and other things like that are meant to be like, no, this is Brazil. I'm talking in Portuguese. We're referencing Brazilian names and indigenous Brazilian people.
It's an attempt.
It's an attempt at authenticity that I think that's why I don't want to like condemn the writing so much as just acknowledge the failings of it.
I think it's like an attempt at the writing in the same way that like TV writing is often an attempt at this kind of writing. This is like an Alias episode where like all this stuff kind of gets brought up, but there's no depth to it and there's no real interaction with it.
It is a Captain Planet level of engagement.
Sure. Yeah, 100%. Same
where
thing.
like, in an episode of Captain Planet, they go to a village where there's strip mining and then they beat Hoggish Greedley and it's over. And it's like
Greedley.
Yeah. Captain Planet had the best villain names, dude. Duke Nukem, Hoggish Greedley, Verminous Scum.
Wait, are the Duke Nukem games?
No, not related, but I think it's one of those things like Hulk and Hulk Hogan where like they share a trademark because it was something like that. Anyway, so she saves Arancia, but Ehrlich, who is sitting up above overseeing all of this, the very definition of a white overseer. It says he's a worshiper of the Waura warriors, a godhead in his tiny corner of the universe. Erlich Westerlund revels in the scent of death. Very much like the captain in Apocalypse Now, of course. Marlon Brando in Apocalypse Now, very
100%.
similar thing where he's become engaged. He's become enamored of the indigenous people there. He picks up this gun that's leaning on his chair and shoots Arancia just because he saw that Jessica Priest liked her.
Cared. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, one thing that we need to note is that Jessica Priest discovers that he has taken the Heat 16. Is that coming up?
Yeah.
Anyway, long story short, I want to say though, this sequence of him picking up the gun and shooting her sucks farts. Yep. This is an example of really terrible drawing. Not even terrible storytelling, bad drawing. And I'm going to say why. Rarely do I stop and say this is bad drawing. This is bad on all levels. Here's why. The only time we actually see the full gun is in this shot where it's leaning against his chair and it's just silhouetted. It's also barely looks like a real gun. When we see him pick it up, we see him pick it up by the barrel. We just see a long cylinder. We don't see him fire it. We see the effects of it with her brains getting splattered out. We see her laying on the ground. And then we see him holding the barrel of the gun up by the very end of the muzzle. Not where you hold a gun when you're firing it. This is a terrible page. This is an I'm running out of time page.
Push back slightly. The panel right before him grabbing the barrel, you can see the gun.
That's what I said. That's the only time you see the whole gun, and it's just a silhouette, and it doesn't really look very gun-like. If you don't notice,
it looks like a sniper rifle.
I guess it's just. I'm just saying that
it just doesn't make sense that he would grab it the way that he grabs it, and then
hold it that way. It's badly drawn.
It seems like it's not good. I agree with you that it's not good.
There is one shot of the gun. I'm saying it's an inadequate shot. We understand it. There are a lot of things that we don't understand in this comic that we've had to go back on a little bit. But anyway, she engages with this guy. This is where she learns that while she was unconscious, he used x-rays to examine her entire body and retrieve the Heat 16 module, which she swallowed.
What does that mean? How did he get it out?
Well, we have no idea. It could have been any number of ways. There are ways that you might get it out through someone's intestine tract with like a magnet, I think, maybe. I don't fucking know. That might not be true. But what's important here is she swallowed it too. We didn't even mention that. She swallowed this like biological weapon.
She was kind of forced to, right? Or no,
she didn't have any other choice. She said, "I gotta watch what I eat," and she swallowed it.
Yeah.
So the ferals show up just as she's being interrogated by this guy who's trying to find out what the Heat 16 is, and the ferals allow her to escape through the compound, chasing Westerlund, the guy who runs the mines. Westerlund runs straight into the ferals, who do a full force fucking fatality on this guy.
Yeah, rules.
Now this rules on one level. I want to point out though, the money shot for this, where they're actually pulling out they grab his head and pull out his spine, pull out his entire spine while decapitating
It's like
him.
1 inch tall.
The money shot is the tiniest panel. If this were Greg Capullo drawing it, do you know how sick that fucking shot would be
100%.
Of the head getting pulled off?
100%.
That's why I think some of this issue in particular feels rushed, because some of these storytelling beats are bad in ways that are worse than other parts of this 3-parter.
I do like that the head with the spine on it is biting one of the panels.
Yeah.
Though, that's pretty good.
That's a fun touch.
And also, like, that whole panel's kind of cool, and like the ensuing panels. I agree with you. I do think it's rushed. I do think it's like, man, that should have been 2 pages. And instead you gave me some bullshit earlier that I had to draw for no reason. And I'll put that that's the thing I'll put at the feet of Alan McElroy of not knowing how to pace a comic book.
Right, because a comic script and a movie or TV script are different structurally.
100%.
So she escapes into the jungle. We get another flashback 12 years ago. So we learn she's 26 years old. That's why she has stepkids from a guy who's like in his 40s, because she has to be a hot 26-year-old and a mom. And you can't be hot and a birth mom in the 90s. We know that.
Never.
Here,
there's never been a hot mom. What are you talking about?
Not in the 90s. The MILFs hadn't been invented by American Pie yet. That was 2 years later, I think, 99. So, long story short, we cut to this next flashback where she is doing a school shooting. This would have been a couple years, of course, before Columbine.
Basically like a year before.
That was 99.
Oh, no, 2 years. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. But shoots a bunch of people inside her school, comes outside and starts shooting the police, and the police are taken off guard. Most realistic thing about this scene is that the cops outside the school shooting don't know how to handle it.
Can't do anything.
And then she shoots the news reporters. This drawing of her coming out of the school is maybe the worst drawing in this entire 3 comics.
It's not great.
It's terrible. The anatomy sucks. The perspective is off. The guns are weird. She's just gleefully shooting through people.
I'll say across these 3 issues, the coloring is abhorrent.
We're not digging into it too much, but
there's not a single moment where I'm like, oh, coloring, pretty good. And Todd Broker has colored Spawn already. However, I think that the tone of this book across 3 issues is so all over the place.
They try to be a little more cinematic with some of the colors. Like this sequence has this red hue all over it. That's like more moody and more conceptual because it's a flashback. It does not look good.
It doesn't work, and it doesn't look good, and it's really bad.
So we get another cut to Jason Wynn finding her a few years later in the St. Bart's prison for the criminally insane, which sounds like a real place, I'm sure. She's singing "I Got a Wiggle in My Feet" and it seems so incomplete. And she's just singing nursery rhymes to herself again. Jason Wynn comes in and is like, "Oh, Jesse, they don't understand. You don't belong here." And basically is like, "Come be Dexter for me." And she's like, "Okay, that's it." He basically says like, "Come be my murder minion and use those murder urges on the right people who I determine to be the right people." This is just another cliche. It's just a cliche on a cliche on a cliche on a thing cribbed from another thing from another thing from another thing. These are all moments taken from like this next sequence feels very Predator, where she's being chased by the jungle by the ferals. She traps one of them. She like traps one of them in a pit. The other one catches her. And here's the thing. The ferals, the one thing I don't like about them is that this whole time they're just saying like priest, and it's saying over and over that the only thing on their minds is finding Jessica Priest, getting the Heat 16, and they're just going priest. They only get their speech back enough to start being misogynist to Jessica Priest.
Yeah.
They only get it with everybody says you're a crazed banshee, a truly lethal bitch goddess. I always saw you as a tasty piece of ass. Which like truly lethal bitch goddess seems like the pitch
goals
for Jessica Priest. Better, and it sounds better to 2024 ears than the writing of it actually does to 2024 eyes, if you know what I mean, to compare it that way. We breezed over that school shooting thing, but that's horrendous to read by 2024 eyes. Not putting that on them either. It was not a big thing back then. It was something that was like, it was not as much a social issue that was happening. It was a very abstract idea. It was a horror movie idea.
An abstract fear.
Yes. It was a horror movie idea at the time. Very much like, okay, that sequence to me feels like the Frighteners when they flash back to like seeing the massacre in the hospital in that movie, which was the Frighteners in 1997. It would have to have been after this.
It's a 90s movie. right?
Frighteners was 1996.
Whoa.
So this is taken straight from the Frighteners.
Hey.
Again, another thing that's just like a movie reference on a movie reference.
But
She has
also having a screenwriter write your thing, of course, they're just referencing movies, you know?
Yeah. So through the course of the fight, one of the ferals escapes with the Heat 16 after taking it off of Werlen Merker, or whatever the fuck his name was. Ehrlichman, whatever the fuck, German smile. He takes it back
Ehrlich Westerlin.
to Ehrlich Westerlin. I was all over that. I had all the syllables.
You got there.
So the one of the ferals escapes with the Heat 16. The other one, she like throws into a giant pile of ants, like a giant one of those monument ants. You know what I mean? Like the giant ant hills.
She says that like fire ants, like just if you hit a fire ant hill, they'll attack you, which is partly true, but not in the way that it happens in the comic.
No, you remember in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, the one Nazi gets eaten by like fucking poison army ants. They like, I think it's Kate Blanchett's character gets like totally stripped of her flesh.
Yeah.
It's one of the coolest, one of the only sick, cool scenes in the movie. Anyway, that's what happens to this feral. She kicks him into the thing. He gets consumed by jungle ants. Meanwhile, having seen her defeat the feral, the Waura warriors come out of the jungle and surround her and paint her up with their face paint.
And they accept her as one of them.
Okay.
Great.
Here we are again. The feral is back at the compound with the twins. They're like kissing here and
hate it.
Oh
I hate
God,
it so much.
Shall we begin resequencing the planet, mon sister Amor? And she says, in a bit. Right now I want a little slap and tickle, brother lover. I've been a bad girl. They're like, this is beyond a like Cersei and fucking Jaime Lannister love. They're like reveling in the like.
This is part of the reason I will not watch Game of Thrones. I can't do the incest thing. I think it's just so gross.
I mean, it's not gross, and they're making it extra gross and sleazy here. And I mean, this is well before like Game of Thrones was on TV. I think the novels are coming out by then. I'm not saying,
of course, but I'm just saying it's just like.
But like, no. I'm saying this was back when it was even more sleazy and less in the lexicon. It is insane. I know what you're going to say. That incest isn't something that like you can always count on people.
From all of Game of Thrones.
Bro, it turns on too many people that I have had direct contact with in my life. Not people I know, but people I've seen and met. And there's a whole contingent of like social media where you can find people who are way too into it. It's become so, and I mean, like, there's a cliche of stepmoms and dryers. This is at a time when it was like still horror movie sleazy, and this is presented in a very like deliverance-y kind of like.
I know that you probably feel this way a little bit. Aren't you a little bit happy when you don't engage with like one of the things that like everybody loves?
Yeah.
So that when people ask you about it, you just get to go, yeah, I don't know. I've never seen it.
I haven't seen it. There are things that Pierce, I'm going to tell you, there are things that I purposefully maintain in my life that way. There's at least one recent movie that I really wanted to see until everyone I know started seeing it, and people either loved it so much or hated it so much that I realized I could never watch it without it being politicized to someone, whether I loved it or hated it. And I'm not even going to say what it is. It was not Joker 2. I would gladly give you my opinion on that if I had seen it. I am getting some marvelous schadenfreude out of it failing completely.
It's just making me feel great because I gave it a 5 out of 10, and then I gave Harley Quinn or Birds of Prey or The Emancipation of Harley Quinn a 7.
That was a better movie by 1,000,000%.
Oh, by like 1,000%. And I love it. Terrifier 3 just surpassed Joker 2 in box office.
Not surprising.
But it's also a little bit nuts.
But it's also a little shocking.
Yeah.
Not surprising given what we know now.
Right.
In a vacuum, pretty shocking.
Insane.
So this has been Box Office Report, but she, with the spirit of the warriors guiding her, she breaks back into the compound and blows the twins away just as they're about to launch their experiment. They're like happily toasting and dancing, and she just comes in and she goes, you know, it doesn't
burn,
even matter
baby,
what she
burn.
says. Yeah, burn, baby, burn. That's her, like, much like she did to Al Simmons, she kind of chars them alive. We get back to a small tropical island where she is, of course, in a bikini. Another weird drawing of her. And Jason Wynn is
wearing
like
a bikini that actually
beach.
looks like a bikini for once. And also, it has the same print as her shirt from the first issue. The happy faces.
The smiley faces, yeah. She gives Jason Wynn the Heat 16, and he asks if there are any complications. She says nothing out of the ordinary.
And then we get the most Rob Liefeld ass face while she eats a cherry.
Oh, that is a fucking uwu clown level, like, that sucks. She says nothing out of the ordinary. He says, take a few days and see me. I have an op you may actually find to be a challenge. And that seems like maybe a reference to Spawn. Yeah. This last page is maybe the page that works best in the whole thing.
I was just going to say, it's the best page.
It's a splash page of the charred out husk, like corpses of the like incest twin scientists. And then the bottom inset panel is like a family photo of her and her like husband and stepkids on the teacup rides
at Disney World. It's great.
And the kid's saying, faster, I want to see daddy blow chunks.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So we're deep in this episode. I know there's going to be a few edits, so we'll get a little time out of this.
It's shorter than you think.
For 3 issues, I think we did pretty good. Honestly, I don't know that we did a great job summarizing them. They're hard to summarize.
We can do it right now. George, what were these 3 issues about?
Jessica Priest going on a weird mission and showing us that she's been a psychopath her whole life in edgelord ways. That's really all it is just showing Jessica Priest's origin interspersed with the violence and carnage of her missions.
And I think that actually the reason that it exists is because Chapel was a character with a backstory, right? So for Chapel to be the guy that killed Spawn, well, you can just go read Youngblood or whatever the fuck Chapel's in. He had a miniseries. Like, you can read that and you'll get who Chapel is. And this is like, we need to speed run introducing a character, and I don't want to do it in Spawn.
And, well, 3 issues isn't even a speed run for Spawn. 3 issues in a row is a lot for a character to get the spotlight besides Al Simmons. It's just that so much of it is just, like, wasted on weird shit. It's just like a whirlwind tour of like movie cliches and shit. I do want to get into the curse words, the back matter a little bit, some of the letters. I don't want to go through all of them because a lot of them are long. This first one in issue 12.
A few of them reference issues we haven't covered yet, so we're going to save them.
I want to read one of those right now because I think it's going to give a little insight. But the first letter here, the guy says, congrats on the Spawn movie. I saw it 4 times this weekend and I loved it. And he goes on to say, sad it only made $22 million. Still a pretty penny back at that time, but like
honestly, pretty good now.
Yeah, if it's better than, probably more than Joker. Anyway, so the letter I want to read that's relating to the previous story about Angela, it's like the origin of Angela.
Okay.
Is the second letter here. I'm just going to read, it's a question. The reason I want to read it is because of Alan McElroy's answer. Basically, this guy writes in and points out this weird inconsistency he saw in Curse of the Spawn number 10, where Elysium, the realm of the angels, Angela included, is said to touch all points in time at once. And he says, if that's true, haven't they seen the end of days and know what's coming?
Fair
point.
Yeah.
Instead of, this is not getting into the nitty gritty of like the details of the Angela story. This is just his explanation of that. Instead of going with like, well, that's the one thing they can't know. Just like a simple, like, even that's beyond their reach.
Yeah.
He gives this answer. Pierce, do you know who Marshall Applewhite is? If I say the name Marshall Applewhite. Marshall Applewhite.
And also, I'm sure our listeners don't either.
Well, some of them probably do. I'm betting at least one does. Marshall Applewhite was one of the two main leaders, the more well-known of the two and the later surviving of the two leaders of the Heaven's Gate cult.
There's a whole cult about that movie?
Okay. Yes. No. No, you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Heaven's Gate. They all committed they all did a mass suicide because they believed they were going to be reincarnated as aliens on a spaceship in the trail of the Hellspawn comet, which was passing in the late 90s. That also might have been 99, I think. 98. Anyway, Marshall Applewhite was the sort of figurehead, and he was the kind of preacher, I guess you'd say, of the cult. And he had hours and hours, tens, dozens, hundreds of hours of video recordings that are still on YouTube. They were early pioneers in hosting video on the internet that you could watch of him trying to explain their philosophy. And it was all just like, and the rays of light will be reborn inside the people of the aliens. I say all that to say, the response Alan McElroy writes here is basically just a Marshall Applewhite monologue. I found this to be bananas. And I'm just going to read this response now.
Go for it. Start with the question.
Okay, I'll read the full question.
As it is like written, because I think that's important. Context is important.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Dear Curse Word guys, I just read Curse of the Spawn number 10. While reading it, I noticed something I thought you should be aware of. On page 13, Catherine shows Angela the armor of the Hellspawn from the days of Caligula. Angela, in awe of its size, asks who killed it. Catherine tells Angela, you did. Angela argues that she couldn't have because she hasn't left Elysium since she got there. Catherine explains, and I quote, time isn't a straight line. It's an ocean, and Elysium touches all parts of its ever-shifting tides and currents. If Elysium touches all parts of time, it would touch the part of time after the war between heaven and hell, since it's touching a time in which one side in the war... Sorry, there's a typo here. Since it's touching a time in which one side won the war and Elysium is still standing, we can tell that hell lost because if it had won, it would have burned Elysium down. Why am I the only one who sees this? Please clearly define for me the way in which Elysium interacts with time.
It's the most Comic-Con ass fucking question.
Are we to believe this is some kind of magic xylophone? And Alan McElroy writes,
are we sure it's Alan? Because sometimes Todd responds.
It says, Alan McElroy writes.
Perfect.
Knowledge of time and time within knowledge can be very different animals. The touching of all parts of time in no way necessitates simultaneousness. Time is ever shifting. It ebbs and flows as events alter and sway within its currents. Each temporal flow is different and unique from the last. It has not only surface but also depth. Things move within it, shift its focus. Time is in no way immutable. We consider it spatial, solid, but it's like trying to grab a fistful of water. Time crashes against the shoals of events and can be changed, shatter into an infinite number of continuums. Even if time were a straight line, between any 2 points on that line are an infinite number of points, each of those points being in the head-on cross-section of an intersection line. Now consider the spatial rotation of the point on that line and how many points are actually cutting its surface. We're back to infinity again. Your question is valid and quite insightful, but you must consider that Elysium stands before us one moment and can cease to have ever existed in the next. The forces at higher levels of existence, consciousness, what have you, and levels still higher than those, maintain an ever agitated and torrential struggle between order and chaos, entropy and regeneration. Time is one of the greatest mysteries of the mind. We are driftwood on its currents, but Elysium and its heavenly hosts are part of greater aspects of time, and even they can't know its secrets. Infinity is its own master. In the simplest terms, consider Elysium a particle in the ocean. That particle touches other particles that touch still others. In that regard, the first particle is in direct contact with the last, even though neither has any true knowledge of the other.
I see why this guy got hired.
That's... If you understood that is all, we're almost into Time Cube at this point. So we get more letters about Angela there.
Cube 2, Hypercube.
Hypertime Cube, Hypertime. Wow.
In a way, I do understand why like he would get hired for this job, and also why he writes TV. Because like, yeah, I guess you do have to think about stories in that way.
It's really something. Cool. That is a lot of nothing that was said there. Anyway,
yeah, that's a lot of Spawn.
That Billy Madison, like we are all dumber for having heard that. The next issue, they show some pictures of manga Spawn in the back of these.
Yeah,
we get an ad for the Creech, Greg Capullo's The Creech, which he writes and draws. Looks kind of cool.
Which is coming back soon. For it. Actually,
yeah.
As we record this, it's coming back soon.
King Capullo, miss you on this episode, bud. I'll tell you that. The best page in this comic is the ad for the Creech on the back. This
which is not to say that Dwayne Turner is a bad artist. We're not saying that.
No. I read some of Sovereign 7. I went back and found that. Looked at some of the art on that. I really enjoyed his art on that. Inking himself with a less involved and sort of flatter kind of like 90s comic style coloring. I thought his art looked great.
And I also think with a script that is probably a more traditional comic script
that isn't the ebbs and flow of particles in time.
Yeah.
There's a great letter in Curse of the Spawn 13. It's long, but I will read an excerpt from it. He's asked this kid asking about where he can get a Red Angela figure. He's very focused on that. Yeah. If he signs up for the club now, can he still get Red Angela? He says, okay, where did you get your idea for Spawn? Also, many times in your comics are stuff relating to scriptures. Did you learn this as a kid or someone told you? Also, did you ever use a satanic Bible or Bible, both in quotes, for reference? And are you Christian, religious, or satanic?
Wait, how old is this
options. Kid? One of your biggest fans, Josh Litwicky, age 13.
Perfect.
West Allis, Wisconsin.
The best.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, there's one other great bit in here from that will explain to you exactly who the audience for Curse of Spawn is. 13-year-olds who ask questions like this. Just one request. Could you please have a Spawn Power Rangers team up? And when they get in trouble, have Spawn bail so Clown can disembowel and decapitate their mothers? Sorry, I really hate the Power Rangers.
You know, what's really funny is in 2024, as there have been a million Power Ranger crossovers, like Power Rangers Batman, and we've gotten like Power Rangers Ninja Turtles. It's funny that a kid was like, yeah, I want Spawn to kill
Power Rangers mothers.
To kill their mothers, not them.
This is the era, this is the level of like, yeah, I want Clown to kill the Power Rangers mothers. Like drawing that in a notebook level of like fans that are being written directly to.
This is why when I was a kid, I was just like, I didn't like Spawn. Because I was like, I don't like the people that like this. They seem, because they were mean to me.
Getting picked on by the Molgoths.
I was like a Star Wars nerd,
right.
At a time when you could still be that and it wasn't like the culture.
growing up in the South, I knew a lot of dirtbags. And dirtbag is a word that has different energy in different places. Dirtbags in the South are dudes who lived in their trailer, which no sweat, no shade at all on people who live in trailers or grew up in trailers.
Of course.
I spent a lot of my youth hanging out with people who lived in trailers. I was a dirtbag. Very much so. I was a teenage dirtbag, baby. But people with like the thinnest mustache you've ever seen, wearing their off-brand Jinkos, walking around the trailer park, trading Spawn comics. I'm describing my own youth.
Yeah.
So I was definitely the target audience for this kind of shit. And that's why I feel so nostalgic despite the criticism of this. Todd does answer, by the way. He says, as for your other inquiry, I'm neither religious nor satanic, but merely alive. Love that answer. I don't really dwell upon where I came from or where I'm going. I suppose that if there's a greater entity out there and it wanted us to have the answers, then given that they created the cosmos, singular they, base Todd,
hey.
It would be a simple matter to make us understand. Therefore, either there isn't anything out there or we're meant to be ignorant about it, and I'm pretty secure in my own ignorance. Not too dissimilar from things he said before. With all that said and done, it doesn't preclude me from putting a spin on a subject matter that everyone has some sort of opinion on. And he just goes on to tell him where he can find Spawn t-shirts and stuff. Does not address Power Rangers. Lots more stuff. There's a very long letter about Angela fighting Neanderthal Spawn in the comic. We get a look at some more figures. The Total Chaos line is being previewed here. This is a line that was, I think, not Spawn related.
It isn't, but here's the thing. All of those characters, way cooler than almost any of the villains in Spawn.
Maybe not Corn Boy.
No, that's basically overt kill.
Yeah, I was going to say.
He's a cooler overt kill.
I do love the fucking images we get of Manga Spawn in the back of these.
Sick.
Manga Spawn looks so dope. I had Samurai Spawn, which was a similar vibe. Pretty cool. Okay, so, and then, let's see. Last issue. There is a letter that, more than anything else we've read or said, will exemplify the exact energy of this comic. It will tie this whole thing up in a neat bow. This is a hard to do 3 issues and talk about all the relevant context. So thank you for bearing with us. I want to wrap up kind of talking about most of the back matter here, because a lot of this is about Angela and stuff like that. People are very up on Curse of the Spawn. They love this comic.
This is extremely popular with Spawn fans. Like, that's the thing. It's like Spawn fans are into this book. They're excited that it exists. They're excited that it's giving more context to the lore, and we're going to get into it. Next episode is quite literally the return of Angela, so we're getting into 9 to 11 2 episodes from now.
Yep.
But yes, this is a book that is wanted. Maybe this arc is not wanted.
I will find out. Well, I should have looked ahead the back matter, but I'll look. We'll see if there's anything about Jessica Priest in those. I want to read a letter from Canada, from a Canadian fan. Curse words. I just finished reading. Oh, the other thing I want to say about that kid who was 13, he said Todd McFarlane is the coolest guy ever, aside from Will Smith.
Hell yeah.
Very
Kinda
97 thing to say.
1997's Men in Black, right?
Yeah.
Or is it Independence Day?
It might have been Independence Day, which, oh man. Anyway, just shows you a little of the vibes of the era. So
Will Smith could have been Spawn.
Would have been bad. Final letter from a fan from Canada. Curse words. I just finished reading Curse of the Spawn number 11, and I thought I could share some of my views on it and the whole series with you. Let's start with the art of Mr. Turner. He has one of the most detailed styles I've seen in years. I still wonder how this book comes out as regularly as it does. Kudos to Danny Meeke and Todd Broker as well. The writing in turn brings many thoughts to mind. The concept of the book is extraordinary. It adds a lot of depth to the world of Spawn while being independent of it. It's a good idea to do several mini-series so that each story is brought to a conclusion. On the downside, the characterization is not all that it could be because you spend only 3 or 4 issues with the same characters. Moreover, Alan's writing is provocative at the least. I think that's a little bit, I think he's saying like, it's at least provocative. It breaks new barriers and is the first comic I wouldn't let a 12-year-old kid read, especially issues 5 through 8. Being 19, I appreciate the strength and the hardcore emotions Alan communicates through his writing. That's all for the moment, and I shall say that the low prices make it even more interesting to keep track of your evolution every month. Marc-Andre Daigle, age 19, Trois Rivieras Ouest. I don't know how to fucking speak French. It's Ouest. Oost, Quebec. And he says, this is Todd this time, says, this comic book was never intended to be everybody's cup of tea, even those that are big Spawn fans. It was meant to give a bit of a different look into the world that Al Simmons has gotten into. And though I do agree with you that it can be somewhat frustrating not to have every character flushed out for those that already exist in the regular Spawn book, funny typo, it actually gives me more room to expand on them. It causes a bit of a love-hate relationship. Some insight there. I'll continue to hold the line on the pricing as long as possible. So far, that's been over 5 years. I usually find ways to do things the way I need to and not have to raise the book prices. I wouldn't show this to a 12-year-old. I, a mature 19-year-old, can handle it, is the exact vibe of this comic.
Yeah, even though it is the most 12-year-old comic of all time.
Yes. This is for a 13... This is what a 13-year-old turns on a rated R movie to see.
Oh, yeah. This is trying to get the Spawn in general is the trying to move the antennas so that you can get like Cinemax or like Showtime after hours.
Exactly. Oh, there was a whole expose in one of these letters about a TV program that was like talking about Spawn and how violent it is. There's a response from a reader who was really upset that they showed all these things that kind of looked negative for Todd McFarlane and for Spawn, showing like all the stuff about the violence and all that stuff. And then there's a point where the kid says that he's mad that they showed a clip of Todd saying he wants the Sam action figure to have a farting action. As it's too immature, and Todd is like, well, I mean, I'll be honest, man, I'm pretty fucking immature.
As we know.
ToddFather's vibes. Well, I want to wrap it up there because we're getting really deep into this, and there's more we could talk about. We could have spent a lot of time on 3 issues of this. I think we set the stage for a lot of what's to come by talking about Alan McElroy and Dwayne Turner at the same depth that we gave Todd McFarlane at the outset and that we've given to Greg Capullo over the years. I think it's good to set that stage. And I hope readers or I hope listeners are listening to this. You do not have to read this comic. That's part of why we did this episode. So you don't have to read these. I think my final thought is just going to be that I don't think you have to read this. I always encourage people to read the Spawn issues. I think you should read those. They're fun and cool.
Yeah.
This one, I think you can skip it. And I'm going to make that my final thought, is that I hope you've listened to this episode and I hope you've had a good time listening to it. But ultimately, you do not need to feel compelled to seek out these issues.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the world of our podcast, we've given a lot of context for what Curse of the Spawn is, in the sense that, like, here's who Alan McElroy is, here's who Dwayne Turner is. They do a lot of these issues. As in terms of what our next episode is going to be, theoretically, it's more Curse of the Spawn. However,
we'll find out.
I don't know that I love that idea. It is the thing that fits next in the lovely, as always, Spawn reading order by Blake Whitlow. Yeah, this is one of the Spawn ancillary stories that don't matter. It's not even one of the ones of all time. Spawn does not appear.
No.
This is the first comic that we've covered that he does not appear in.
No. And, that's why as we do more Curse of the Spawn, we'll try to breeze through them even faster in terms of not 2-hour episodes. But we did lay a lot of the groundwork for that by talking through who Alan McElroy and Dwayne Turner are. And, I like both of them as creators. They've both done things I enjoy.
100%.
Curse of the Spawn, it exists. And we'll fill you in on what you need to know. So, Pierce, what's your recommendation for this week?
Ooh.
I'm asking the question this time.
My recommendation for this week is going to be another James Tynion book. It's going to be World Tree.
Oh, okay.
A little cyberpunk horror kind of thing. Highly recommend. That's it.
Cool.
That's all I got. How about you?
I'll go a little mainstream and say I've really been enjoying Agatha All Along on Disney Plus.
Oh yeah,
that's a really fun show. I respond to witchy women, so it's cool for me. I'll give another recommendation, just one mainstream comic that I think is really great to read, and I loved it. And in fact, the week we're recording this, it was a fucking great issue of this comic. I want to say Ryan North and Iban Coelho / several other artists. Fantastic Four is without a doubt the best thing Marvel publishes. It is funny. It is heartfelt. It understands the Fantastic Four and just the medium of superhero comics as a purveyance of joy and of happiness that other comics are struggling to get. It's just great. This latest issue is so funny. I laughed out loud so many times. I'll send it to you. Pierce, tell us all about the social media.
Oh yeah, right. If you want to follow us at Spawnography Pod or at Spawnography, please rate, review, subscribe on whatever podcasting thing that you use. It'd be great. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, whatever anything is, and anytime that you're listening to this, leave a review. If you leave a review with words, we'll read it on air. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Hey, George, for Todd so loved the world,
he gave his only begotten Spawn.
See you later, Hellspawn.
Spawn!